Hello everybody, welcome back to Hunt Creative. Today we're going to step outside and we're going to make some modular pasture or estate walls for your tabletop gaming. These are going to be made from easy peel foam core from the dollar store. We're going to cut a bunch of 1/2 inch strips and 3/4 inch strips and 3/4 inch squares. And all of these pieces are going to be assembled to form our walls. Here you see me peeling off the paper. I've got it all in time lapse, so it's going much quicker. Once the paper's all peeled off of these pieces, I'm going to slightly round the edges with this piece of sandpaper. You could use a nail file or any abrasive stick. I just happen to have this on hand, and it does the job. Just a quick run through on all of the edges here. Rounding them over and smoothing them makes the brick appearance stand out a little more after painting, so it's worthwhile to take this step. And we're just going to blow through these one at a time. Shouldn't take very long. These little modular walls are useful for outdoor scenes, creating pasture walls like stonework or brickwork pasture walls that you see in the English or Irish countryside. They can also be used indoors for indoor settings to set up faux walls or partial walls for a 2.5D dungeon setup. Going to be making walls and end posts as well, so that's why we have this wide variety of sizes and shapes. Once you get into the flow of things, it doesn't take very long. I like to put on some music in the background or stream a bunch of YouTube from crafters that I like to watch. You could put on movies in the background or watch TV if you like. I'm building several pieces here so that I don't have to come back and do this again in the near future. You can build as many or as few as you like. Just soldiering through one piece at a time. For projects like this, I like to make lots rather than few. And that means that if I have extras that rarely get used, at least I don't have to come back to the crafting table later and make more and try and match up a paint job. I've got enough pieces here for 4 6-inch lengths, 8 3-inch lengths, and 11 or 12 end posts. And you see I'm just giving them a quick sand and tossing them to the side so I know what's been done and what needs to be done. See, my camera's struggling a little bit keeping up with all the rapid hand motions here. We're getting there, one piece at a time. Once we get done rounding all the edges, we'll be ready for the next step. Just a few more to go. Almost done. I set myself up to make a few little 1-inch lengths of wall as well, just to help fill some gaps and round out shapes. There we go, last piece I think. Now we're ready for the next step. So here we're going to assemble them with hot glue. Basically I'm going to stack 2 half-inch widths on top of each other. And then I'm going to cap them out with a 3/4 inch width at the top to act as the top capping of the wall itself. This gives us a 3/4 inch wall, which translates to roughly a 5-foot wall in real life, which would seem to be adequate for most pastures, and gives us a good suggestion of estate walls. They don't have to be super high or super fortified, as long as we can suggest them on the table and let our players' imaginations run through. And they're pretty quick to assemble. Just making sure that the ends and edges line up nicely. You can see it's 2 narrow widths capped by a wider width. And that gives us about an 1/8 inch lip at the top. Or rather an 1/8 inch lip under the top. Just a little detail to grab the eye. Again, I'm just cranking through one piece at a time. If you batch process this, set yourself up for success by doing one step at a time for all of your pieces. You should be able to get through this craft probably in a long afternoon or a day if you include dry time for the painting process. And once you get them all assembled and textured and painted, you can just chuck them in a drawer and pull them out whenever you need them. Consciously made them slightly thicker than they could be, so that the 3/4 inch width on the top will allow a mini to stand up on there, and the 3/4 by 3/4 inch end posts will also allow a mini to stand on top. This gives us plenty of opportunity for tactical situations where someone with a ranged weapon or a ranged spell could get some altitude and a better vantage point over whatever encounter is taking place. They're also nice because they give us a very visual indication of a barrier at play, even though they're not very large, so players across the table will be able to see over these walls and the minis in behind them. So you're making good progress here. Just taking a couple of seconds with each piece to make sure they're nicely aligned. We're making good progress here. Crank through these little short pieces. These are meant to form gateways or archways, or adjust for slight irregularities in the terrain texture landscape around the walls. It's nice to have a little bit of flexibility when setting stuff like this up. You could make some pieces with 45-degree or 22.5-degree ends if you wanted to make, slight angled walls or slight angled corners. My intent here is to remain pretty true to the 90-degree angle for the most part. There's all our wall sections completed, and now I'm going to move on to assembling the end caps. So I'm making these a little bit taller. Each of the wall sections are 3 layers deep, and we're going to make these 5 layers deep so that the end posts stick up above the walls. It gives us visual interest and allows for even more tactical opportunities during encounters. Also provides the difference between partial and full cover if you like to use cover rules. You can see I'm just checking them out to make sure that they sit nicely together. I'll just go on and finish assembling the other pieces. Just a little dab of glue in between each of the layers. And then I wiggle them and squish it down so that the glue is as thin as I can make it before it starts to dry. Just keep going. Just a few more to go. Binge watch the entire Crooked Carpenter in creation playlist on Hunt Creative while you're doing stuff like this if you'd like. And if you like these videos and get value out of them, please feel free to subscribe or click like, share them with your friends. All those activities help the YouTube algorithm and help us grow the channel. A few more to go. Making good progress here. Pardon my hair. Now we're just about ready to move on to the next step here. Once we get this all assembled, we're going to start texturing them up to look like brick or stonework. Here we go. Now I'm going to start texturing my completed walls, and basically I'm just going to go with a very basic brick pattern, 1/2-inch bricks, and I'm going to offset the layers just eyeballing it. And these lines in the sides of the walls will just read as brick texturing once we paint them up. And I'm just using the 1-inch grid on my cutting mat to create the initial marks and then following up with offset marks in the second layer. And I'm going to use my ruler and make 3/4 inch squares across the top plate, slightly different size. Gives us a square stone capping for the top of the wall. Those border lines will give us some visual appeal once they're all painted up. There's one done. spent a couple of minutes doing the rest. Doesn't take long, and the end results after painting will look very nice. And here I'm just using my first piece as a template, and I'm freehanding these stones so that they're slightly unsquare, and that just adds to the natural look of the piece. If you prefer to make them a hard 90 degrees, then you can use your rulers and set them up that way. I'm using a gel ink rollerball pen for this because the roller makes a nice indentation in the soft foam core foam. And I'm just continuing the mortar lines along down the side of the face of the wall as well. Anyway, jumped ahead a little bit, and I'm just texturing the tops of the walls with a balled up piece of tin foil just to give the illusion of stone texturing. I'm not going to do the sides because they're very small, and once they're painted up, that sort of texturing will kind of disappear into the paintwork. But the tops are nice to be textured. It just takes a few minutes. This is something you can do to almost any styrofoam or foam construction. It just adds to the natural feel of the pieces once they're painted up. Just a couple more pieces doing the tops of the end caps. Basically, I just did an alternating brick pattern on all of these pieces so that they all kind of feel the same. And here I'm going to paint them up. Step 7 we skipped because I had made a card about attaching magnets to the ends of these walls so that they stuck together nicely. And I just realized that that was a bit of an unnecessary step for my purposes. If you want to, you can magnetize your walls, and then when you set them on your table, they're going to stay together. I just chose not to because I'm going to be using these in a variety of ways. And here I'm just black bombing them with some flat black craft paint to get them started. Craft paint on the ends of my fingers. If you don't like it, you can wear protective gloves, that's for sure. And I'm looking for about 99% coverage here. I'm trying to get as much paint onto the piece as possible so that none of that white foam core shows through after they're all painted up. And I don't really count the dry time for this acrylic paint because it's reasonably quick. Oftentimes when I'm working on a set like this, where I have multiple pieces, by the time I get finished painting the last of the pieces, the first ones are almost dry. Occasionally I have to wait a little bit in between coats, but it's not too bad. And I primarily use the cheap dollar store craft paints. I don't really feel I need to use expensive modeling paints on terrain pieces like this. I'm not too worried about painting the bottoms of the walls, although I may come back afterwards and just hit them with a black coat in case they fall over or something like that. And one thing I didn't do with these walls is I didn't make any with ruined or crumbled ends or any damage to them, and that's something that I may regret later, or I may come back to in a future video and just make some with some damage to them or some crumbling bits and pieces. A few more pieces to go with the black coat, and then we can move on to the next step. I'm using a fairly soft brush with fairly big bristles to drive that paint in between the layers of foam core a little bit. Again, I don't want any white showing once they're all painted up. And once these are all black bombed and finished, we're going to be able to start layering in some colors. There we go, all coated in black. So here we're going to add in some colors, and I chose a reasonably complex scheme with several different colors that I'm going to layer in. This brush I'm using is almost the exact width of the thickness of the foam core, so it makes it nice and easy to get in there. And I'm not looking for perfection, and I'm not looking to generate any kind of pattern painting. What I really want are random splotches of several different stone-like colors and several bright colors that are going to sit under the dry brushing and just add a hint of color to the bricks or the stone on these pieces. Here I'm starting with kind of a medium brown color, but I'm going to go with browns, tans, a bright orange, a bright red, and we'll see where we go from there. This took a fair bit of time because I went with so many colors and because I chose to do a very random smattering of how those colors landed on these pieces. So I wanted to get that variety as kind of a showcase as much as possible. If you're painting these, you can choose as simple or as complex a color scheme as you'd like to have. I've seen some really, really nice brickwork patterns that focused in on the red terracotta clay colors, and you could probably achieve that with 2 or 3 different colors. under the dry brushing. And you could choose a brickwork style that appears frequently in your personal life. There are tan bricks and gray bricks and red bricks and all kinds of different bricks. In this case, I just wanted random brick colors all kind of smashed together, just to kind of represent the fact that in some cases the owners of these walls would be poor people who cobbled them together from field stones that they found, or reasonably wealthy merchants who paid masons to put these walls together nicely for them. And this random color pattern kind of plays into both of those scenarios. If it's a choice, it costs. If it's use the materials you can find, costs less, but it looks more random. And here you can see that I've got several different colors layered in, and I'm going to start in on some very light ivories and tans for some of the bricks here just to finish them off. The idea here is to not leave any black showing on the walls at all, because that will be a very, very dark contrast to the other colors or hues that we've used on the brickwork so far. And right now they look a little bit ridiculous because they're very bright and there's a lot of contrast between the various hues. But once we finish with the dry brushing, they'll look very nice. Again, this is kind of a zen in the art of moment where it takes some time to get it done, but the end result may or may not be worth it to you depending on how detail oriented you like to be and what your objective is for the final product. In a lot of cases when it comes to something like this, I'd like to take the time now, because I've made lots of these pieces, to make them as complicated and complex layered colors as I can, so that once they're finished I don't have to worry about it and I don't become tired of kind of a standardized gray drab stone like color. Not that I'm likely to become tired of these, but you know, the artist in me cries for doing a good job. And here we got them all coated, all ready to go. We're going to start the dry brush process here. I'm going to start off with kind of a medium tan color. I just got to hit the whole thing. But I can hit it lightly, so I'm looking for about 50% coverage of this dry brush because I'm going to go with several different layers of dry brushing. I find that building up the layers adds to the depth of final presentation. I'm sorry about my camera, it's having trouble keeping up with my rapid hand motions. Let me just keep layering on the dry brushing. It's pretty subtle so far. It's better to go subtle one layer at a time than to go heavy the first layer, because you can always add more, but it's very difficult to remove paint at this stage. And I don't want to have to go back and recoat any of these. I just got a little bit of a system of lining them up in a specific order so that I know what I've brushed and what I haven't, and I keep going along one piece at a time, cranking it out like I was listening to music this day. I often like to play music in the background, but it means that I can't use the sound for my video because I don't want to violate any copyrights. And each piece gets a little bit of each of the dry brush colors that I'm going to use. pop at a time. A few more pieces and we'll be ready to move on to the next color for dry brushing. And here we go with the next color. Looks like we're going with a lighter gray dry brush in this case. You can see that the dry brushing is starting to mute down those ultra bright oranges and reds a little bit, and it's starting to unify the pieces to make them look as though they belong together. And this will continue as we go along. And again, this process is very flexible. You can use as much or as little dry brushing as you care to. So if you like the variety of hues and contrasts that these different colors make, you can stop dry brushing whenever you feel they're good enough or ready for your table. Or you can continue on as far as I've taken it. I've taken it quite a ways in this particular video. And I've used more colors than maybe most people would. And again, I'm looking for about 40 to 50% coverage of this color. I want some of the previous dry brushing to show through, and I definitely want some of the hues that I took the time to paint on each of these bricks and squares to show through. It was interesting when I was doing the brick painting. I tried very hard to remain as random as possible, and I still sort of fell into those seems like random patterns that people do, like the second brick is the one that needs attention on this row, or always the fourth brick on this row, or whatever. So I was very careful to try not to do too many repeats. Here we're moving into another color of dry brushing. Each layer of dry brushing kind of unifies the piece, makes it look like it's been weathered and out in the world for quite a while, experienced some changes of seasons and whatnot, and also mutes the brighter colors a little bit so that while they still show through, they're not jarring to the eye. And they also cover up some of the errors and or imperfections that are in the brick painting. I wasn't too fussy about them. I didn't try to make them perfect, but I did try to make them good. Picasso worked for years to develop the skills to be able to paint a photorealistic painting, and then worked for years to abandon or control that impulse towards perfection. And his most famous paintings are those that are imperfect and creative and postmodern. So Sometimes chaos is your friend, and a few errors here and there under the dry brushing just add to the verisimilitude of the presentation. Makes it feel like it's an actual stone wall, even though it's just foam and small. Right now we're entering into the world where I'd feel these are actually pretty good as they are and could be used on the table without too much more dry brushing. They're all a little bit different. I can see the pops of color from the reds and the oranges and the various shades of tan and brown that I've used. Definitely see the mortar lines between each of the stones and bricks. Starting to feel unified, like they all belong together. But it looks like I decided one more coating of kind of a light cream color was in order. Just slap that on there. Get the highlights highlighted. The lowlights remain low-lighted. In this case, there's no real dry time at all because I'm only dry brushing. So by the time I work my way through the entire batch, the first pieces are all but dry. But it is important that you dry brush over top of dry paint. Dry brushing over wet paint is just going to get you a muddy, awful, blended look that doesn't really do what you want it to do. Which isn't to say that muddiness doesn't have a place, but not for these. You can see they're really starting to look very uniform and cohesive at this point. My poor dry brush is getting very frayed, so I think it's only ever going to be used for dry brushing after this project. Also dollar store cheap variety pack of paints. So here I've added a dark wash to them, and now I'm just hitting them with a very light touch of gray to finish them off. The dark wash re-accentuates the border lines, and then the light gray dry brush over top just finishes off by kissing those highlights one more time and makes them look completely done in my book. I know a lot of people out there like to avoid gray sometimes, and it's kind of a shortcut to say that all rocks are gray, because they aren't. DM Scotty will tell you. Add some colors and it adds to the depth of your project. I'm very happy with the appearance of these. Going to be a great part of my modular scatter terrain arsenal. You can use these to make 2.5D rooms. You can combine them with the clip-on doors that I've made in previous videos. You can use them as divider walls for dungeon tiles if you like to use those. End caps can be used as haphazard random pillars in an open gallery or an open cave system. All kinds of uses for this kind of scatter terrain. We get very close to being finished with these here. In hindsight, I might stop here. Just making sure I get all the sides of the end cap pillars. One more touch on the very tops of the walls just to make sure they all look nice and uniform. Just really light dabs and brushes across the grain. And that texturing that we did with the tinfoil ball really helps pull out the feel of stonework. You can see that there's variation in the surface. Looks like I'm just doing one little quick slash on the sides of the walls just to make sure those bricks look nice and uniform. Just a quick stroke to make sure I kiss all of those side bricks. There we go. And finally, the last stage possible, I like to coat all of these with a coating of matte finish Mod Podge. This will help protect the foam from extra dings and gouges, and it'll give them a little bit of heft on the table as well, which is nice. The foam itself is quite light. You're slathering it on, looking for like 85 to 99% coverage. I don't worry too much if I don't get it in every single mortar line, as long as I coat the surface for primarily, just to make sure that it's got that extra plasticized coating of the Mod Podge. Do all the pieces. And this far in, another few minutes coating them with Mod Podge to protect them is worthwhile. And honestly, this scatter terrain cost pennies worth of materials, probably under $1. And it's something that I'm going to be able to use for years on my tabletop. A few more pieces to go. They're looking really good. Once we get them all coated and they dry, I'll zoom out for some action shots on my flocked dungeon terrain, or exterior terrain as the case may be. here we go. In play, in place. The end caps lining up with the wall sections. I've added a little house and some wagons and some scatter. And in this case, we're looking at a squig ranch where the goblins are breeding squig pairs to make more squigs. I don't know if that's how squigs work. I don't really care. But this is what they look like in play on the table, scaled next to some minis with some other terrain around them. As I say, I'm very happy with these, and I think they're going to be a long-standing addition to my tabletop. If you like these videos and get value out of them, please feel free to subscribe, share, and click like. And join us next Thursday for another It's New Video Thursday, where Hunt Creative will release another crafting video to help you set up your game table.